As soon as I saw a few screenshots of Observer, I was reminded of an older title called Soma. It was a game with poor gameplay but an excellent story, so you could say that I chose to try Observer simply because it reminded me of Soma. I know that's not the best reason, but it was good enough for me. Naturally, I wanted to play in Ultrawide and was disappointed to find out that this is not possible without several fixes. The game will allow you to go with an aspect ratio of 21:9, but even then it would just stretch the image and zoom in, making the game unplayable. Luckily, the internet does not sleep and some nice modders had taken care of the game's issues. It requires some hex and configuration file editing, but after a short while I got it working. I even disabled the chromatic aberration which was bothering me and unlocked the game's frame rate. Once you take care of that, the game truly looks nice and will work in both 21:9 and 32:9. If anyone needs help, I've kept a text file in which I wrote all the things that need to be changed in order to get it running, so send me an email and I'll be happy to share the instructions with you. The game starts with our protagonist sitting in a cyberpunk car. We are introduced to him and learn that he can enter the minds of people in order to extract information. His name is Daniel Lazarski and he's a detective. We also learn that he has to take medicine in order to remain sane. Apparently entering other people's minds clearly takes its toll on one's sanity. One of the first things that struck me was the fact that the game's voice acting keeps switching between good and really bad. Just listen to these few lines.
There you go. Looking better already.
Yeah, wouldn't want me to mess up. Can you see the headlines? Another leech goes berserk.
Don't be like that. It's just...
Yeah.
This is clearly not a game with a big budget, and to be honest, the voice acting is mostly good, with the occasional quality fluctuations happening as you've heard just now. Considering the limited resources a low budget game has, right at the start of the game our protagonist also receives a call from his son, giving us our main objective in the game, namely entering the apartment building where he lives and finding him. The game takes place in a cyberpunk environment with everything that fits into this genre. We have the futuristic looking tech, which simultaneously looks as though it came from a 90s action movie. We have the bright neon lights outside and the huge advertisements, and the game world in which large corporations control every aspect of human life. Some of these things are obvious, others are presented in subtle ways. As we enter the apartment complex, we are greeted by its janitor. He seems to have some cheap augmentations as his mental awareness seems to be suffering under it. He's also the only other humanoid we will see in this game. His appearance is nice and the interactions interesting, but I wish there was more to it. As mentioned, the game takes place within the apartment building, and while it's fairly large, it does get repetitive. The game provides us with two additional types of vision. One can detect biomatter, the other one is more of an X-ray vision. When examining, these two tools are quite important, but with them comes a different set of problems. You see, a developer could make it so the player will only see the relevant items, but that would make those visions redundant. Therefore, once activated, they show you many things you could try to interact with. Most of it is directly marked as not useful by the system, saving the player the need to interact with everything they see. But there is still a lot that remains. I would sometimes find an object and start looking at it, wondering if it had any significance to the investigation or not. Having these two modes also means that you will be prone to switching through them from time to time in order to make sure that you're not missing any important clues that are not visible outside of these modes. At least at first that was my approach, but as the game progresses, you start realizing that the areas where these visions are necessary are limited and clearly recognizable. As you go through the building, you will be knocking on the doors of the people living in the apartments there in order to ask for more information. Most of the time you will get no response, but whenever someone does answer, it will usually lead to an interesting conversation. Most people living there seem to be kind of not normal. They act and often speak in strange ways, and for the most part, interacting with them will leave you with more questions than answers. Your investigation will lead you to multiple crime scenes within the building, and that's when you will be using your main tool, the ability to enter the mind of another person. These segments are interesting since the imagery within them is rather abstract. Sometimes you will even be entering the minds of people who are already dead, which will be even more confusing. Our character has to find medicine which to use after these segments, but also as time passes. This medicine, however, is easily found, and I was never worried that I would not have enough. I did test what happens if you don't take it, and sadly I have to report that there are no consequences besides a stronger distortion of the image and more messages telling you to take your meds. As for the sequences within the minds of the people, at first I found them interesting, but later on I was beginning to get bored. For the most part, they are simply too long, and all you do is walk as the environments change. There's almost never anything to do in there, and sadly this is the biggest problem I have with this game. The story seems interesting at first, but the game is so linear and boring. It's very long, and it took me over 9 hours to complete it, and after the first 3 or 4 hours, I was already quite bored. The story is somewhat interesting, and you even get to make a choice at the end, which leads to one of two endings. But it's still not nearly as good, or at least good enough to carry a game this boring. In addition to that, at the end you have segments with a monster in them, where you will have to sneak past that monster, and this gets even more annoying. At this point I just wanted to end the game, and it seemed as though the developers had placed yet another obstacle in my way, only to slow me down further. I had to hide, wait for the monster to pass by, then move a little bit, hide again, and wait yet again. It's just quite annoying. And there's something else that I really dislike, but see often in these low budget horror games, and that's the necessity to interact with items by moving the mouse while holding them. If you want to open a door, you have to hold the mouse button and move the mouse in the direction you want the door to open. The same counts for opening drawers, etc. This works really poorly when playing with low mouse sensitivity, which is how most people play first-person games, since you want to be able to look around at a normal speed. I did mention how the game reminded me of Soma somehow. Unfortunately, where Soma had somewhat weak gameplay on one hand, it had a great story which hooked the player on the other. Observer's gameplay is significantly worse than Soma's, while the story is mediocre at best. It starts off interesting, but the more you discover, the more obvious its flaws become. I wanted to play this game and I wanted to like it. I honestly did. That's why my disappointment is so great. With each passing hour that I had played this game, my enjoyment was diminishing and my boredom was increasing. When the end credits came, I felt a sense of relief. The main reason why I actually managed to finish it was because it somehow managed to fool me into believing that it's just about to end, and that happened multiple times. So I was constantly motivated to push a little bit further because the ending is surely gonna come right after this turn, and then I'd realize that this turn has taken me over an hour and there's still no ending inside, but surely now it's gotta end. And that's how it managed to fool me into playing it to the end. The gameplay and story are stretched way beyond my expectations. The game should not have been more than 5 to 6 hours. So, should you get Observer? In my opinion, no. The version you see before you is the old one. The game is being remastered. If you want the old version, you can get it on GOG.com, which is anyway the best place to buy games and know that they will actually be yours, since that's what no DRM means. True ownership. However, it costs €33 over there, which is too expensive considering that the remastered version will be coming out on Steam on the 10th of November for a bit over $20. So clearly it's worth waiting for it, since the developers promise more content and lots of quality of life improvements, as well as superior graphics and even HDR. People who have played the demo of the Redux version say that it is still without native ultra-wide support, which is frankly unforgivable. Regardless, back to the question at hand. Should you try it? Well, try the demo first, see how that feels, and then decide if you would enjoy between 8 and 10 hours of that exact gameplay. I want to support smaller developers, but in this case I simply did not enjoy the game, so I can't recommend it. Thank you for watching my video. I hope to see you on the next one, and until then, have a great day.